95% of those, 95% or 570,000 shut down within 3 years, right? We all know that it's a lottery ticket most of the time. Many companies fail. However, of that 95%, 40% of the failures are due to incompatibility in their founding team, right? So 38% of total startups fail due to their team. And so correctly getting ahead of that and preventing the behaviors that cause fragmentation in your team can increase your chances immediately by 38%. So I can't get this across enough how important it is to make sure that you are, one, putting yourself in the right mindset as you're forming your teams, but also as you're expanding your teams. Because one incorrect hire, one wrong mistake, one disagreement can break apart your dream. And so it is one of the most important things you will do as a founder and as an entrepreneur is putting around the people who will help you build and grow your business. And at any point, if there are any questions, Remy or anyone else, feel free to interrupt me and I can answer them. Or I do have time at the end as well where we can do a full Q&A.
Okay.
But
thanks,
no,
George.
Of course.
I'll pipe in every once in a while.
Absolutely. No worries. It keeps it more interesting than just listening to me talk the whole time.
I know the feeling. Absolutely.
So why do teams fail, right? Often it's the mistakes at the very beginning. And as you can see here, I listed out 4. There are probably 50 or 60 more, right? But these are usually the 4 most common reasons why founding teams split apart or early employees split from the business. And it's the initial investment, right? Who's going to put up the capital? It's equity splits. Who gets 50%, who gets 40%, who gets 5%, and why? Role assignments, right? I think it's very difficult in the beginning when everything needs to get done by a few people. Not only does it become very difficult as far as, oh, well, I'm doing this and I'm doing 80% of the work, and it's not fair, right? That's a very common thing that will happen. However, most of the time it's because there's this lack of communication and structure around roles. Things need to be divided up. Things need to be owned. People perform at their peak performance when they have a sense of true ownership of something. And sometimes as the first founder who brings in co-founders, it can be very difficult to let go of your baby. But I urge you to really get over that, because that is something that will not only help you scale this business, but save you a big headache in the future. And this naturally goes into the next point, which is hierarchy. We think startups are these lean beasts where it's in a garage, everything's getting done, everyone does everything. There's no such thing as structure. However, someone needs to have the final say. There needs to be one person, the CEO, who has the final say of the business. Otherwise, you have 3 people, all 3 of you disagree on a point, nothing will get done. There needs to be someone who can put their foot down and say, this is the direction we're going in. Either you're on board or you're not.
Yeah, George, I've also noticed these things. I'm generally dealing with pre-seed startups, so the initial investment, doesn't have as big of an impact in the startups I worked with. But the equity split, that's huge, and the role assignment. So what I've noticed in terms of behavior is I've noticed that startups, they'll say, okay, everybody does everything. But what really happens is everybody wants to do the sexiest stuff and nobody wants to do the dirty stuff, right? And so, assigning the right roles and that being clear means that, hey, if you're part of marketing for whatever reason, there's a marketing conference in Kauai tomorrow, you go, right? It's your marketing. Not that everybody goes, right? Because now everybody wants to be marketing, right? So.
Absolutely. Everyone always wants to do the sexy parts of a startup. And the sexy parts of a startup are usually the last things to make your startup successful.
I agree.
The things that make your startup successful are the boring, monotonous, busy tasks that no one wants to complete. And those are the things that will make you successful. To put it into context, when we first had our initial reach out into market, when we invited the first 500 members to join the platform, It was actually a list of 7,000 executives that I manually scraped from LinkedIn myself over the course of 4 months, spending 3 to 4 hours every day manually scraping names, email address, LinkedIn, role, location, all of that data. There was no scraping tool. You couldn't automate it. You put a bot on LinkedIn, they delete your account. This took manual grind to get this done.
Yeah.
And so just to, you may not have to do something like that depending on the nature of your business, but hopefully it lets you see that not every task is sexy. And we tend to romanticize the idea of being a founder. We tend to romanticize this idea of being super successful, and it's the most fun you're ever going to have, when 95% of the time you're going to be beating your head against the wall saying, this is the hardest thing I've ever done. But maintaining your course and maintaining your momentum forward during those difficult times is what will help you be successful. That's what separates the winners from the losers in this game.
Excellent. Thanks, George.
Absolutely. And so how do you build the winning team, right? We talked about roles, and Remy brought that up, and that can be very difficult. But how do you break it up, right? And what does that look like? And I think the most important thing to do is, if assuming you are the first person on the ground, you need to think about your weaknesses. What can you do? What can't you do? And admit those flaws. Because if you try to do everything, you will quickly find out that you will fail. So you have to be able to admit what you're good at and what you're not. For me, I am not technical at all. Data-wise, engineering-wise, not my thing. I taught myself basic JavaScript and HTML out of necessity to get a site off the ground. However, if I had any hopes of building a business, I needed to find a CTO. And I needed to find a business partner who could actually run complex analytical algorithms across the membership to really build an intelligence behind the platform. And being able to spend as much time as I did in building teams, that was an advantage for me, right? Because I quickly was able to pick apart what I was missing, and I knew who to approach. However, if you don't have that experience, what you need to do is look at the tasks you do on a daily basis. What do you breeze through, right? And then what do you struggle with? And just because you breeze through it doesn't mean someone else should go and do that, right? In the early stages, you still need to have a job, right? You're not just a CEO who gets to sit and watch everyone work. And VCs will not invest in you if they get a sense of that. What you need to do is be the CEO and the CMO, right? For example, like you can see here, co-founder 1 is the head of product and also the head of sales. But co-founder 2 looks like they're also the head of product, right? And that's okay, because there are more than one versions of different functions. So when you look at product as a function, right, there's product management, as in the strategy, the execution, the marketing, the go-to-market planning. And then there's the technical side of product, which is the design, the user experience, the testing, right? And very rarely are you going to be the person that can do everything. And if you think you can, then great. You might be a unicorn, or you may have to check your ego a bit and realize that you can only do so much in the amount of time you have in a day. And that's something that I've seen a lot of people mess up on, and a lot of people destroy their businesses by trying to do everything themselves.
Excellent. Would you say that this grid is a good grid for all the teams to kind of go through? They can replace the engineering with technical, right?
Yes.
So instead of engineering, but they can go through this for each of their co-founders and kind of check this off, and then maybe identify some gaps.
Absolutely. And one of my favorite exercises, I actually did this for my business, is write out Post-it notes. Put Post-it notes on a board and write out every task and job that needs to get done in your business on a daily basis. And go around your table and take turns picking off one Post-it note of something you think you own or you think you would do well. And keep doing that. And that's how you'll quickly see that if you've built your team and selected the team well as far as additive personalities, you'll find that this segmentation will happen naturally, right? There are people who gravitate more towards the sales and the customer facing aspects of a business. There are people who prefer the numbers and the operations. And then there are people who are more technical and prefer behind the scenes, the creation of the product. And so what you'll find, if you find that you're reaching and grabbing for the same post-it notes, you may have to ask yourself, is this actually a team that can work well together, or is there too much overlap? So I really think, as soon as possible, preferably when you start the venture, but as soon as possible, meet with your team and really try to figure that out, because it's very difficult to shift that once you begin building this thing.
Excellent. Thanks.
Absolutely. The other thing I would very much stress is be understanding of people's life circumstances. All right. Not everyone can take the same amount of risk as you, and that's 100% okay. As you can see here on the left, we have different risk factors, right? What are the things that go into this? And now I know many of you are on the younger side, so some of these may not be an issue for you, which is great because you may be like more closely to co-founder two. However, as you get older and as you have, things like family and kids and marriage and all of these things that may really overcomplicate this and may force you to say, well, I don't know if I can give up a full-time salary to do this full-time in the very beginning. And that's okay, because you have to be flexible in the beginning and understanding of that. Otherwise, if you're spending all of your time trying to find someone, and this is very much in the context of the CEO founder, right? If you waste all of your time trying to find someone who believes in this as much as you and is willing to risk it as much as you're not going to find anyone, because this was your idea. This is your baby. You can find people who believe in it and want to help you achieve that dream, but expecting someone to be able to sacrifice as much as you're willing to is a failing task, because it's not going to happen. Thinking about some people, like, for example, in my team, one of my co-founders in the very beginning maintained a full-time job, right? And he built this, he was our engineer, and he built it on nights and weekends. And I was okay with that because he got the work done. And I think, the benefit of, and I'm assuming most of you are very young, the benefit of being young is that you haven't been shaped by corporate America yet. And corporate America tends to hammer in this idea of the 9 to 6 and quantity of work equals quality of work. And that is the opposite of a startup and the venture game. It is all about what you can achieve. And so you need to be flexible with different people's schedules, and don't disqualify people just because they're not willing to dive in full time like you are. There will be a time for that. Now, what I will say is make sure you have the conversation with them where they know that that is your goal. You want them to be full time. You expect them, when you can pay them, to come in full time.
Do you find most startup teams are teams that, if not all, most of the co-founders have something else going on to generate revenue for themselves?
Yeah, in the very beginning, I absolutely, I think that's the vast majority. Now, again, there are different life circumstances, right? Maybe you come from a wealthy family, or you hit the jackpot in an earlier role and had a great exit. This isn't your first time. Those things can go into this, and maybe you can go without income. However, for the majority of people, whether they make 6 figures or whatever, 5 figures, their cash flow is key to their lifestyle, and asking people to sacrifice their lifestyle and take on that stress, that's not how you get the best out of your team.
Yeah, I remember my second startup. The first startup took off right away. There was money there almost on day one, so it wasn't a big deal. It was just, it kind of just struck gold. But the second startup, I was working full time. It was a freelance type job, but but I still had to be there during the day. It's not like it is today, right? With regard to remote. And then I would get up really early, do maybe an hour or two before work, and then come home. I'd have dinner, maybe catch a show, and then do a couple of hours at night, and then on the weekends do full days on Saturday and Sundays. And I did this for years
Yep.
before it was about 2-3 years in when we got investment and everybody could get paid.
Yeah. And everyone's journey is different, right? Sometimes it can take 3 years. Sometimes, as Remy said, you can be off to the races in the beginning. Some people are able to raise money on just an idea, right? And it really depends on so many factors that, frankly, are completely out of your control. Most of it is
Raising,
just life's events.
yeah, raising money on an idea, that's more of a Palo Alto kind of thing than, than a New
Exactly.
York thing, but
You know,
yeah.
that's Palo Alto when you're golf buddies with the managing partner of the VC fund. That does not happen. And if it does, good for you.
Yeah,
I'm rooting
absolutely.
for you. um, so moving on to this, I'd like you all to do a quick exercise. So I'd like to take 60 seconds. If we need longer, that's fine. But write down on a piece of paper, or I know we're the digitally native world, write it down on a note, an email, somewhere. The names of your co-founders, include yourself. And then underneath those names, write down what you believe each person is responsible for, how many hours per week they are putting in, and what is their equity percentage. Don't share it with anyone else here. Keep that for yourself. And I want you to bring that to your next team meeting, and I want you to review it together.
Now, how many hours are they putting in, or how many hours do you think they should be putting in?
You know what? Let's make it both. How many they're putting in and how many you think they should put in.
Uh, okay.
And this is where I cue the Jeopardy music to just pass the time.
Yeah, absolutely. While they're doing that, I always tell startups when I start working with them that the thing that I think will blow up the team in all likelihood will be team.
Yeah.
It's going to be team dynamics. Generally, it goes to generally in most cases, it's this concept of unfairness
Yeah.
that one team member is doing less than the rest, and they're locked into an equity position because they didn't have the discussion up front. And the people, human beings, when they believe something's unfair, really find it difficult to move forward. There's actually research around this where, and they do this even with chimpanzees, where they give all the different chimpanzees like two apples, and they give one apple, right? And
Yep.
the one with the one apple is really angry, can't believe. But on the other hand, you give that same chimpanzee one apple and everybody else a half apple, and they're fine with it. So it's not the quantity, right? It's
Yeah.
the fairness factor. They've done research with teams and with people, and it's the same thing. We are so sensitive to fairness. We have like a fairness meter in our brain, and if we see that it's unfair to us, more so than it is for others, for others we seem to be willing to
Absolutely.
accept it.
No, it's so true. And I think, the other thing that people fall into here, and that's it, time's up, everyone. No, I'm just kidding. um, but if what we tend to fall into, Remy, is we forget the actual work that goes into the tasks that other people are completing. And we always assume it's easier than it actually is, especially when we don't understand what they do. So if you are a business person and you are passing on expectations to your CTO, you're going to assume, well, what do you mean it's going to take you 6 months to get this product off the ground? Are you even trying? Right? But yet you've never touched a line of code in your life. And so it's very important to put yourself in other people's shoes and to be transparent and communicate with them so that you can understand that they are working hard. And you just have to be open to that.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And coding is a great example of that, because I've seen that happen many times where the CEO will think that the person who's doing the coding is just not doing the coding, or it comes back with bugs and they're like, oh, why can't they do it right? And it's like, a great point.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And when I first started this, I was that person where I was like, I don't get it. Well, how are there so many bugs? If I did this, it would be so easy. And then I spent a day doing HTML and had the hardest time ever. And I was like, oh my God, how are you coding in these languages? Right. And you learn that bugs are a normal part of it. And actually, you learn that they're kind of fun, because every bug that you find as an entrepreneur is a bug your customers don't. And
Yeah.
so you have to gamify it.
Yeah.
And so, we talked a lot about how to assess your team, how to pick your team, how to put it all together. But what happens when there's a gap, right? What happens when you need to find someone else? For me, there was myself. There was my other co-founder who was a business person like myself, but more on the data and analytics side. And so we needed to find a CTO, right? Otherwise, we were going to a dev shop where, if you're using a US based dev shop, you're getting ready to spend $150,000 to build a product that you don't even know if it's going to work. Or you go overseas where, some people have concerns about security or IP ownership. Basically, you're stuck between a rock and a hard place. So what do? You can give up and walk away, or you can find that person and sell them on your dream. Right. And that's what I did. I found my CTO using a variety of these tools. There are so many tools that are out there. LinkedIn, 600 million users. Even though they're a competitor of ours, I'll still give their platform props. AngelList, 5 million users. Co-Founders Lab, 400,000 users, right? There are millions of people out there who you can approach. I think the biggest thing that holds people back is they're terrified to put themselves out of their comfort zone. But if you find yourself hesitant to do this, then I hate to say it, but I would say you may want to hesitate about being an entrepreneur, because it's all about putting yourself out of your comfort zone. This isn't any different than raising money. You have to be able to reach out to people and have a conversation. And what you'll find is when you force yourself to do it a few times, people are very warm to this idea. People love it, right? Because it makes them feel good about themselves. Wow, this person wants me to help them build their dream. And so how do you do that, right? You do this through connecting with people, using tools. One of the best ways, the technique I used, is I leverage Co-Founders Lab, which is very much tailored towards finding co-founders, as the name would suggest. However, you do have to watch out, because there are a lot of dev shops hiding and trying to sell their services. And if that's not what you're looking for, then you'll find it to be a big waste of time. However, where it works really well is a lead gen for other platforms like LinkedIn, because you can identify people. I identified my co-founder, our CTO, and I reached out to him on LinkedIn. And, I'll tell you, big surprise, he didn't answer right away. In fact, it took 4 months of chasing him to get him to answer. And now 18 months later, we've been working together, and we've got this thing running and humming along. But to give you an idea of the constant rejection and persistence that, if you've done this for a few months, you'll see that that's just the name of the game.
That's a great point. Maybe to add a little bit more detail, so you identified people on Co-Founders Lab on that platform. Then you go to LinkedIn, and what did your initial message? Did you try to connect with them first and then message them, or did you try to message them first before connecting, or did you do both? Try to message and connect in one fell swoop?
So I've always been a big fan of A/B testing. So I did both. I tried both to see what worked. Ultimately, what I landed on and what the data showed is that there is a much higher likelihood of a response if you connect with the person with a short note and then email them directly once they accept your connection. LinkedIn InMails have a very low response rate, probably because most people abuse them for sales tactics. The way you can easily find the people, you're going to get their names, you're going to get all of this stuff on a Co-Founders Lab tool, and you reach out to them. And then, as you can see here, this is how you reach out to them, right? So you identify someone you want to speak to. How do you do it, right? And so, there's the initial outreach where you have to introduce yourself, right? You have to point out what you like about their background, right? Otherwise, you can't send this generic message that's, I found you on Co-Founders Lab and would love to speak about my idea. It's, no, I found you on Co-Founders Lab, and looking at your profile and your experience across these businesses and these products, I think you're the perfect person to build this business. And this is what I'd like to build. Are you open to an intro call? And always end it on a question. Questions increase the likelihood of getting a response by double-digit %. I don't know why. It's just human nature. It's instinctive. When we're asked a question, we feel the need to respond much more so than when we are faced with a statement like,
You're absolutely
I
right,
look forward to
George.
speaking.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I get pinged all the time on LinkedIn, right? And and the ones that I respond to, generally speaking, even if I'm not interested, is the ones that end on a question because I'm stuck. I'm like, oh
Yeah.
no, they left it as a question. Now I have to respond, and I don't have to respond, right? But I feel this need just to
Yeah.
get it off my chest. Even if it's a no, no, thank you. I'll respond, no, thank you, but I'll respond. If they don't ask any question at all, it's a statement. I'm like, okay, thank you. Not I don't have
Yeah,
to do
because then
anything now.
you don't know what they want, right? They're not
That's
being
right.
clear about what they want. And
Absolutely.
so if you do that and it works, then the part comes, okay, you got them to answer you. Awesome. You're going to meet with them in person, or you're going to talk on the phone in the days of COVID or Zoom, whatever it is. You need to make sure you have your pitch down, right? Obviously, if you are not a, rainmaker salesperson, don't put pressure on yourself. It's okay. But you need to be able to have this pitch down so that when you speak to this person, you have one shot at a first impression, right? And you don't have to immediately sell them on it, but you need to at least make sure you know what you're talking about. You need to make sure that you, again, have analyzed their background and figured out what you like about it. You have to be able to explain your vision of the product, where you see it going, what you imagine it looking like in 6 months, a year, 5 years. You have to be able to sell them on your vision. And this is one of the most important aspects of being an entrepreneur. And, it's one of the things that I like to joke around where, spending, nearly a decade in executive recruiting, it was the perfect training ground for this because all I did on a day in, day out basis was hear about a company in 15 minutes and take that and create a pitch to get someone to quit their job and go work at that company. And when I applied those best practices to my own business, it it worked very well for me. And so, the thing I would say is you don't need 10 years of experience in executive recruiting to do that. It's just it helped me realize that I had been doing that for years. And so, no one will ever sell this business as well as you can. And actually a lot of VCs will look poorly on a startup where the founders hire a salesperson too early, because the question will be, well, no one's going to sell this business as effectively as you. Why aren't you selling it? And so it's just food for thought to really make sure that, again, practice your pitch. It'll help you later on because it's the same pitch you will be reusing 1,000 times, whether it's customers, investors, or future employees. The
Yeah,
net,
and you're right. You don't have to be a super salesperson.
no,
What people are looking for is that you're passionate about what it is you're passionate about in
absolutely.
whatever authentic way it is for you to demonstrate passion. So it could be
Absolutely.
anything.
You have to be able to, pass on your excitement. If you can get that person a fraction of the amount of excitement that courses through your body when you talk about your business, your idea, then you succeeded. You just need to make them go away from that meeting thinking, wow, I want to work with that person. And then they go back to their day job and their boss, yells at them, or there's a fire drill and everything goes, awry. And then they call you back and say, let's keep talking. I can't wait. Right. It's always about the positive experience. You are basically, I hate to compare it to dating, but you're really wooing this person. You are, that's the way you have to create this romantic image of we're going to build this together and you're the perfect person for me. Right. And you have, that is what will get the person to say yes. And that's how any experienced recruiter will handle a recruiting situation. Um,
It's absolutely dating.
yeah.
There's no question to it. So what will happen with me if I'm on the startup side and we're looking to bring in a co-founder that has certain expertise, the initial outreach is made. We do, a meeting or a Zoom call. And it's, do I like this person?
Yeah.
If I don't like them, I don't want them on the team. So that's my
You're going to
first
spend
thing.
a lot of time with them. You better like them.
Yes, do I like them? So that's one thing. Are they credible? So I'm watching them, but they're doing the same thing to me. Is this for real? Is it
Yeah.
worth my time? Does this team have the ability to succeed? And I'm thinking the same thing about them. Is it worth my time? Does this person have the ability to succeed? And I don't make decisions on the first meetings. We have a lot of meetings.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, and part of the figuring out with a lot of meetings is if they can't continue their interest over many meetings, they're not going to be a good co-founder, you know?
Absolutely. It took 4 meetings just to get our CTO to agree to discussing the contract and discussing the equity splits and discussing the possibility. There were coffees and towards the end cocktails involved. You know, it's that's sort of. I think most deals in startup land are sealed over a beer or a drink at a bar. It's unless you don't drink, that's fine. But again, I think it's important. And the point of that is to make sure that you need to have fun with this person. It doesn't need to be your best friend, and often it shouldn't be your best friend, but it needs to be someone who you can laugh at, because there are going to be a lot sorry, not at, because there are going to be a lot of ups and there are going to be even more downs. And so you need to make sure that they can go along that ride with you. Um, the next points, are pretty self-explanatory, right? Listen to their concerns and give honest answers. They're going to see how the sausage is made, whether you try to hide it or not. So just be honest, be upfront, and admit when you don't know something, right? When I met our CTO, I said, I have no idea how to build this or even start building this. That's why I'm talking to you. They love that, right? And anyone would love that, because you're basically saying, I need you to build and run this. And if they have an entrepreneurial hunger, you took the legwork out of it for them because you came up with the idea. And if they believe in the idea, now all they have to do is build it, right? And it's much easier to be the one who joins a startup than the one who built it in the first place. There's once you see that someone has made that leap, it becomes much easier to follow.
What if, George, somebody had a question? What if you do bring somebody on board as a co-founder, but it's not working out?
Yeah, uh, that's a great question, and ultimately, I would say the answer really depends on the situation. But I'll try to give you as best an answer as I can. I think talk to them. You need to be honest. You can't be accusatory. You can't assume malicious intent. Most of the time, issues can be solved, but human beings, for whatever reason, naturally are terrible communicators. You'd think we are the greatest communicators on planet Earth, yet sometimes, at least in my belief, I think we're the worst, because we very rarely can be open about what's bothering us. And most of the time, these massive issues that happen and these breakups, right? These founder breakups started based on something as silly as, well, I think I'm doing more work than you and I feel slighted by that. And, there's actually been this huge rise of founder therapy. But I'll save that tangent. But to get to your question, my advice would be talk to them. If they've done a lot of work, and if a lot of the work they've done is good, then you don't want to lose them over something silly. Trying to replace them will take months, and you lose all of the momentum you've built. However, if the work they've done is subpar, or they're really just along for the ride, and you gave them equity, and they're just there, and they're not committed to this, and you've had conversations and you've tried to work it out, and still it doesn't work, then if it's within your power, you need to think like a business person and not like a friend, and you need to cut them, because a bad co-founder can be like a cancer to a business. And I know that that's a really extreme view of it, but it really is, because the ways that they can affect not only you, but others can really cause an entire business to crumble. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, I'm in complete agreement. The amount of time you'll spend on a bad co-founder, as opposed to on your business, when you start seeing that you're spending 70%, 80% of your time as a team on this relationship with a co-founder, that's a bad situation, and it happens way too often.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And just so everyone can see, I laid out the stats from my own search for a CTO. So you can see, when you don't get answers, it's okay. You can see, out of 345 emails that I sent, that's not including follow-ups. That's just individual unique emails. I only got 35 answers, right? So just over 10%. And that led to 5 meetings. That's a lot of no's, but at least I got answers, which led to 1 co-founder. Right. So it's a grind like every other part of this, right? You'll hear me say that over and over again. So just be prepared for that, but it's okay. Rejection is a good thing. It makes you stronger and it reconfirms your belief in your business. So you found the perfect person, right? And this goes into what Remy brought up, which is equity splits. And so what do you offer them, right? My favorite phrase around this is don't be penny wise, pound foolish, right? And what that means, so pounds, English currency, don't think about the pennies and ignore the dollars. Maybe that would be a better comparison, right? And so it goes back to the old question of, would you rather have 60% of 0 or 30% of 100 million? And that's really the way you have to think about it. And so why is this so difficult? Well, it comes down to 3 personality flaws that all humans have, right? Which is greed, insecurity, and pride. Right? And so you can see, I tried to give an example of like, what would be the question or the voice you hear in your head of, it was my idea, I should get everything. Well, an idea is great. Maybe you deserve a couple extra percentage points, but an idea doesn't get this built. Or, there's the insecurity of, well, what if I don't have the majority and they kick me out of the business? You know what? I think we tend to think that happens a lot more often than it does. It's very rare that your co-founders are going to be the one that are going to kick you out. If it was your idea in the first place, I'd be far more worried about the VCs doing that, especially if that is your instinctive behavior. And if you let that get the best of you, because they will see that as a negative for the future of the business. And then, again, pride, right? It's saying this doesn't work without me and I don't need them. And that's a very quick way to have an idea and nothing else, because a business doesn't get built by one person. There's not a single person in the world who's ever built a business by themselves. And if they say they have, they're probably lying. But yeah, I can't stress this enough to really admit when you are falling into these traps and talk them through and get through them, because they're normal. Everyone thinks this way.
Absolutely. I've thought that way. So
Yeah, we all do.
yeah, I mean,
we all do, and it's completely okay.
yeah.
Most of the time it comes from, our own fears, and they're just thoughts that so long as you don't act without talking them through, you'll be fine. And so, I talked about a lot today. I threw a lot at you, but I think if I had to hammer home 3 points, it would be this. 1, share the Legos, right? You may have heard this before. It's a very common phrase in the startup world. You can't do this alone, right? We have a tendency, think about a kid building a Lego set and they don't want anyone to help them and they want to get all the good pieces. You can't do that, because this business will never scale if you're the one trying to do everything. You only have so much time in the day, and scalability is the number one problem for most startups, right? You can maybe you can get a couple customers, but can you get a couple million, right? Can you replicate and scale? And you'll never be able to do that without letting other people own parts of this business, not just equity, but functions, roles, responsibilities. Trust others, right? Don't do the opposite where it's earn my trust. It's trust until they betray it, right? You have to trust people in the beginning. Keep pushing forward, right? If it were easy, everyone would do it. Something that I heard once that I really liked and it resonated with me is people see the billionaires of the world, the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world, the Jeff Bezoses of the world, and they think, well, they worked hard, right? So I can do it too, and I'm going to do this too. And what they don't see is that the price that those people paid to achieve what they achieved was blood, sweat, and tears. And they think with 40% of their time that they're going to be able to achieve those things. But when the cost of something, when the price is blood, sweat, and tears, and you dedicate 30 to 40% of your time, you will never achieve that because you're not paying the fair price for it. And then ultimately, the most important thing of all, smile, right? Try to enjoy the ride, whether it ends with you ringing the bell at NASDAQ or selling the business or winding the business down and joining another company, it is a fun ride it will be over. And no matter what happens, it will never be a failure, because just by starting a business, you have already accomplished more than what 99.9% of people in the world ever will. All right.